Hello everyone and welcome to round 7 of Chess Olympiad 2024. Today we'll be going over the most important round of maybe the event, India versus China. So today it was after the rest day, India was playing China, the second most best team currently after India, not counting USA because they're not really playing that well. So if India manages to win today, then it kind of ensures them a medal at least in worst case scenario, but hopefully a gold. And the most interesting part of today's match was Gukesh was most probably going to play Ding, and we would get a nice prequel of the World Cup. But to everyone's surprise, when the pairings came out today after the race day, it was Wei versus Gukesh, and Ding just dropped out of the first board, which was really upsetting for everyone. We would all have loved to see the game between the world champion and the candidate. But anyway, it was good for India that Ding is not playing, so we have a bit easier boards on the lower boards. So Gukesh was playing against Wei, who is also a very strong grandmaster with a rating of 2762. He is like almost same rating as Gukesh, and he's also capable of beating anyone on his day. So Gukesh today started the game with e4, moving away from his main d4 opening. Wei goes c5, knight f3, d6, knight c3, knight f6, and here Gukesh surprised everyone by going for the subtle bishop e2, which is not really the best move here, but it actually takes Wei out of his preparation, kind of guaranteeing a game and not getting into some kind of a drawn preparation or something. So Wei goes e4, stopping any kind of d4 next. Now Gukesh goes bishop c4, which is the real novelty, I'll say, because white just moves his bishop twice in the opening and says that I'm fine with giving up the move. But now you have a lot of fixed squares on the e6, c6, and d5. Where he goes bishop e7, d3, knight c6, bishop g5. So it's very common for white to go bishop g5 and just take out this knight so that this d5 square can never be challenged by black, and black can never really push d5 ever. With the bishop here, pawn here, and the knight here, black actually can never have enough pieces to push d5. So black goes castle, takes, and knight d5. He just plants the knight on d5, and black goes bishop e6. White goes queen d2, a6. Here I was a bit surprised by Gukesh's move castle, because I thought maybe a4 is a bit better, just stopping b5. And if black forces b5 like rook b8, castle, b5, a b5, a b5, bishop b3, now the a file is now open for the rook. But Gukesh goes castle first. Black goes b5, bishop b3, king h8, a3, just making a square for the bishop so that the knight can't really attack this. Black goes rook b8, h3, g6, c3, just keeping the squares under control to prevent any kind of breaks with b5 and all. Black goes bishop g7. Now black is threatening to go f5 and open up the position. Gukesh went bishop a2 with some kind of b4 ideas in the future. But black directly goes f5 here, opening up the position, knight g5, which is slight mistake according to the engine, but I don't really understand why. And black goes bishop g8, ef5. Okay, this is a bit of another surprising decision, because with the exchange of this knight becomes weak, and black can really exchange this knight with knight e7 and have some kind of d5 ideas later. So I think I would have preferred if white had the pawn on e4, and if black goes f4, white can just come back here. But Gukesh goes ef5, gf5, and f4. Way he goes c4 here, which is pretty okay move. Just covering up this diagonal, so threatening bishop into d5 now. White takes dc4, bc4, bishop c4. And here Wei goes wrong with ef4. Till now Wei had played perfectly, and his black is actually better in this position with a lot of play of because of this two double bishops and central pass pawn like e4. Here black should have gone knight a5, bishop a2 is forced, knight b3, bishop b3, rook b3. And even though white is a pawn up here, these two bishops and the threat of e4 is just way too strong. But again, Wei goes kind of wrong here. He takes with ef4 first. Now white gets back with knight f3, which would not have been possible if black had gone e4. Covering the e6 square with the bishop, covering the f3 square with the pawn, and then threatening h6. Black goes knight a5, bishop a2, knight b3, bishop b3, queen rook b3. And here white goes knight f4. I think what Gukesh missed here is after queen b6, rook f2, rook b8, you can't really protect this pawn. Because if white goes knight d3, then black can go bishop c4, threatening this. If white goes knight e1, then just black goes d5 and d4 and opens up the whole position with two bishops and a massive pressure on the b file. The better would have been to go rook f2, first protecting this so that black can't get queen b6. If black takes here, white just takes back, and white has managed to get rid of the pair of bishops and is almost a pawn up here, not counting these double pawns. But Gukesh goes wrong with knight f4, queen b6, rook f2, rook b8, rook d1. So he just gives up this pawn, saying that you can take this, I'll exchange everything and go into a slightly plus endgame with rook d6. Black takes here, which is just forced move. Takes, and white takes on d6. Here white looks like he's a pawn up, but black can really protect his a5 pawn first and then take this. And black should actually be very fine here because two bishops are way too powerful than two knights in the endgame. White goes rook d8, bishop c3, knight d5, rook b1, king f2. And here the problem for black is black can't really go bishop f6 because this knight is covering it. It is also threatening the bishop and also threatening knight e7. Just picking up the g8 bishop with the pin. So black goes rook d1, which now gives Gukesh a slight nagging edge by going rook g8, king g8 and knight c3. So two knights versus a rook in the endgame is generally much favorable for the two knights. But here the presence of these two pawns is making the task a lot more difficult than it should be, because the knights are a short range pieces. So when the pawns are in one flank, like only if the king side pawns were there, then knight would act very well and just maneuver around and pick up all the pawns. But with the pawns on both the flanks, black can always kind of disturb one of the knights to go and protect this a pawn, and again then go back to harassing the h pawn. So it's a bit difficult to convert in this position, but of course if anyone can win, it's white. Black goes rook c1, knight b5, rook c2, king f1. Here I think black could have gone rook c1, king e2, rook c2, knight d2 and then start bringing the king, but this is also fine. King f7, knight d4, rook c1, king e2. See how this knight protects the king from check. It protects this knight, and this knight protects the a3 pawn. So it's kind of untouchable, this structure. But still white is not really threatening anything, so black is still fine. Black goes king f6, knight d6, rook c3, knight b5, rook c1, king e3, rook g1, king f2. Like as I said, he'll just harass this a pawn and then go and harass the g pawn or the h pawn. which is a bit difficult for the white knights to protect. White goes knight e2, rook b1, knight c3, rook b3, and white can finally manage to get a4. And with this, white has managed to solidify the position a bit. White can next go something like g3, h4, and everything will be protected, and the rook can't really do much. Black goes king e5, g3, rook b6, king e3, rook b4, king d3, h6, king e3, rook b3, king d3, just repeating the moves for a bit to gain time. Rook b4, and now the knight comes back, hitting this king and getting it out of here. This knight actually protects this a4 pawn very well. This knight is now going to come and start attacking the black pawns. And if black ever managed to get his rook to g2, like for something like rook b2, knight f3, king f6, knight d5. If black manages to even get rook g2, white just drops back with the knight and everything is still fine. Black goes rook b8, knight f3, king f6, knight d4, rook d8, king e3, rook c8, king d3, rook d8 again, repeating the moves, knight e2, rook b8, knight f4, rook b1. So he has managed to get this knight a bit towards the opponent's pawn with the help of a tactic that if black goes rook b4, white can just pick up the rook with a fork. But black goes rook b1, knight d5 check, king e5, knight c3 again. So it might seem that white is not really making some progress, but what white really is doing is just getting black low on time, and he will start putting pressure when black has like less than a minute or so. Black goes rook h1, knight f3, king d6, h4, rook h3, knight e2, and here black goes f4, which is actually the correct move, but I don't really like this move because this allows white to go knight g1, rook h1, and gf4, and white has managed to get a pass pawn here, which is the only way black can lose actually. Without making a pass pawn, if these two pawns get exchanged, I don't think white can ever win, because these pawns are blocked by this is blocked by this. But now there's an imbalance in the position, and this pawn might become much stronger later in the game. Rook h4, knight f3, rook h1, f5. Yeah, Gukesh starts pushing the pawn immediately. Here, black goes a bit wrong with h5. He should have directly gone for this pawn, kind of disturbing this white's idea of going knight d4, king e4, and pushing the pawns. So after h5, white plays knight c3 anyway though. He could have played knight g3 and rook d1, king e4. Sorry, not king e4. Rook a1 and knight e4, and he can start pushing this pawn to f8. But knight c3 is a much more human move with less time on the clock. h4, knight e4, king d7, and knight e5. So suddenly these knights are getting much stronger with the threat of this pawn running down being a reality now. Black goes king d8, f6. Here black had only way of defense, that is rook d1. If white went king c4, then h3, f7, then black goes rook f1, knight g5, rook f4, and then king a6. Here again, white is threatening knight e6 to mate, knight e6, and then just pick up the rook, but black can go h4 here, h2 here, with the check, king e7, knight f4, h1 queen. There is a check, stopping white from going knight g6 and getting a queen. But here what will white go is king c3, because after h2 the same thing, knight e6, king e7, knight f4, h4, queen, h1 queen, and then now white can go knight g6 with a check, forcefully getting the white queen. But black shouldn't really go rook f1 here, but keep on giving checks to white till white goes to some awkward square like king d5, And now black can get the king to e7, knight g5, h2, knight g6, king d7, f8 queen, and h1 queen. So black had to get the king to d5 so that he can get h1 with the check, which is like so important. But black doesn't go there. Black goes to h3 straight away. White goes f7, rook f1, knight g5, threatening this and this, which is a very interesting idea. If black goes h2, which black went, white just drops back with this knight, covering this file and threatening f8 queen. Also threatening the h2 pawn. Black goes king e7, covering this f8 queen. White just picks up this pawn. Black goes after the other pawn. But now this knight is just too strong. Black takes here. The problem with rook f4 is after knight h6, rook f4 is not possible because white has this knight g6 fork. So black can't really guard the f8 square, and white is getting a queen by force. So black went rook a3, white goes king d2, while black goes rook a4, and now knight h6, threatening knight g6 and f8 queen, still stopping rook f4. Black gives a check, king e3, stopping rook f2, check, king e4, and if black had given another check, then white can go king f5, threatening this. If black goes here, knight f5, king d7, f8 queen, rook f8, rook f1 check. But now white has knight f4, covering this diagonal and just winning the game. So after king e4, Gukesh resigned. This was actually the last game to finish, and with this win, India actually won the match against China, the most important match of the tournament. So now we move on to the next game, that is Yu Yang versus Praggnanandhaa, which is also like a very, very close match because Yu Yang is a very strong grandmaster with the highest rating of around 2770, and Praggnanandhaa is 2750, of course. Praggnanandhaa had, I think, the idea of just going for a draw here without taking much risk, and he just does that. d4, d5, c4, dc4, knight f3, knight f6, e3, e6, bishop c4, c5. Praggnanandhaa plays the Queen's Gambit accepted variation. Castles, knight c6, queen e2, a6, rook d1, d5, dc5. So this is all very common theory. White goes dc5 with the tempo so that if white had gone bishop d3, black can go c4. So that black doesn't get c4, white takes here first with the intermediate move. Queen c7, bishop d3, bishop c5, a4, ba4, rook a4. So now white has created a slight bit of a weakness on a6, but black doesn't mind because black's all pieces are so active. Black can easily defend the a6 pawn. Black just castles here. If white had gone something like bishop a6, then black can simply go queen b6 here, pinning this. Bishop b5, rook a4, bishop a4, bishop a6. Hitting this queen c2, then black has knight b4. If queen d2, then black has again knight b4, threatening knight d3. And even though black is a pawn down here, it doesn't really matter because black has superbly active pieces, and white really hasn't even completed its development. So white just goes bishop d2, bishop b7, rook c1, queen d6, rook d1, queen c7, rook c1, queen d6, rook d1, and queen c7. Surprisingly enough, Yu Yang just takes a draw here with white. Everyone had thought that Yu Yang would obviously go for something more, but he just takes a draw in 17 moves. And we are very happy with this because we have 2 white games now and only one black game. So we move on to the best board we had, that is Arjun versus Buziangzi. Arjun was playing in tremendous form and he was 6 out of 6, and today he was again playing white with Buziangzi, who's actually a very, very strong grandmaster, but he's not really been active nowadays. We all remember him from the World Cup match with Carlsen where he knocked him out. Still being 2600 though. and he's still 2600, but his strength is, I think, way above this rating. So Arjun plays e4, black goes e5, knight f3, and black goes for the Petrov. Black just wants to take a draw here and maybe try on the last board for something. White takes d6, knight f3, knight e4, knight c3, knight into c3, d into c3. So this is a very old line where white gets a double pawn but has very good piece play and easy development. But black also doesn't have too much of a problem because the black center is very strong, and black also has a very easy development. So black goes bishop e7, bishop e3, castle, queen d2, knight d7, long castle, knight f6. It's all very common theory till now. Bishop d3, rook e8, h3. So white is planning to go for something like g4, g5 and create some ideas on the h7 pawn. Black goes bishop d7, rook e1, c5. This stops any kind of bishop d4 ideas, so that this two bishop can't really create much of a problem in the king side. So Arjun goes bishop g5, h6, takes, bishop b4. So Arjun says that I won't go for your king, but I'll play for this d5 square though. This d6 pawn is a backward pawn, and my bishop on d5 will be very, very strong, and I can just keep on pressing this slight edge for as long as he wants. But black goes queen a5 here, giving up this pawn, because he says if you take, I'll just go bishop rook a d8 here, threatening this. Arjun goes a3, black goes rook a b8, still giving up this pawn. If white had taken here, black says I'll just go bishop e6, giving up this pawn, go b5, b4 next, and I'll have a lot of pressure against your king. So white goes queen f4, black goes b5, rook d6, b4, just breaking open the white's king, just ignoring this d7 bishop, which is just a free piece for now. But Arjun goes for the right bishop and takes away this f6 bishop, which was the biggest monster of the position, threatening takes, and bishop c3 with all sorts of mating attack on the king. Black takes dc3, bc3, queen c3, rook d6, queen a3. Here white just goes king d2, which is kind of forced because king d1, black has rook b1 check, king d2, queen b4, c3, then queen b2, bishop c2, rook into e1, knight into e1, and queen c1, which is a very, very brilliant line. But Arjun of course saw this and he didn't really need to go for this. He went king d2 just straight away, queen a5, king c1, queen a1, king d2, queen c1, queen a5, king c1, queen a1, king d2, queen f5, and a draw. So even though this was a very short game, 26 move, this was a very, very critical game, because this was a board we were mainly targeting, with Arjun being almost 100 points above Buziangsi and the form he is in. But he manages to hold this board. So we are again now at equal position with 1-1, with two boards going. So we move on to the final game, that is Harikrishna versus Wang Yu. I think this was the board China was mainly trying, because the first three boards were really strong for India, and but still it was Harikrishna on board 4, so we can't really say weak on board 4. So he goes e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, the Italian game, bishop c5. Harikrishna plays very solidly, with the bishop c5 variation, not going for the fried liver, knight f6, d3, d6, c3, a6, a4. So this is all very common theory. Black goes bishop a7, knight d2, castle h3, knight e7, rook e1. White just goes knight f1, knight g3, black goes knight e7, knight g6, and they play a very long maneuvering game. So black goes knight g6, d4, h6, bishop c4, rook e8, bishop c2, b5, knight f1, bishop d7, knight g3. So both of the players have managed to get the pieces to their aimed squares, and now the main game begins. Black goes c5, breaking the white center. White goes ab5, ab5, bishop e3, queen c7, d5, d5, and knight f5. So white says I have a very solid position with the proper center, knights going towards the king, this bishop protecting the e4 pawn. The queen might come here and go for some kind of sacrifice on the h6 pawn. On the other hand, black doesn't really have that great of the bishops, because this bishop is kind of dominated by this, and this bishop is not really doing much. It might try to go to c6 and put pressure on e4 square, but it's not done here. Black goes bishop f5, ef5, knight e7, knight d2, knight d5. So white is trying to go to e4, create some kind of pressure on black from here. With if black takes, white takes here, this bishop is now much stronger. But here white surprisingly goes bishop e4, which is, I don't know how to explain, a bit awkward move, because he's just allowing knight into e3 with a tempo. So black goes just knight e3, rook e3, rook a d8, a pin here, queen c2, c4, rook e1. This bishop opens up now. This bishop is just doing nothing. The knight protects the black king very well, and now black is like almost on the verge of being better. Black goes rook d6, knight f3, rook d8, rook f1, knight d7, rook e1, knight c5. So black is rerouting the knight to b3 to get something to d2, while keeping an eye on f6 with the rook. White goes rook e2. Here black missed an opportunity, which was not really that easy. Black had to play rook d3 here, allowing f6, and if white goes f6, black just plays queen d6 here, knight e5, knight e4, rook e4, and here black goes rook d2 first, queen b1, and queen f6, hitting this f2 pawn. But this is a very critical variation, and a very tough one too. So black goes knight d3, g3, stopping some kind of knight f4 jumps, queen b6, king g2, b4, takes, queen b4, queen c3, queen c5, still keeping a pressure on the f2 pawn. White takes here, black takes back, and white finally manages to get rid of all the pressuring pieces. Queen c5, bishop c5, rook e5, bishop d4, knight d4, rook d4, and it turns out white is a pawn up at the end, but this d3 pawn is way stronger than these two pawns, so it's just a draw. Now white goes rook b5, rook c4, rook d1, rook c2, king f3, so d2 is always met by king e2. Black goes g6, fg6, fg6, opening up the f file to go rook f8 and win the pawn. Rook b7, rook f8, king e3, rook f2, rook d3, and this is just a draw because rook f2, king e4, rook d3, king d3. Black manages to get all these pawns, and white has this strong pass pawn. King c4 takes, b4 takes, b5. White has this king cutoff, so black really can't come up with the king and use his connected pass pawn, so it's just a draw. Black goes here, rook d7, rook b1, king c5, rook c1, king d6, rook b1, king c5, rook c1, king d6, rook b1, king c6, rook c1, king d6, and a draw. So this is how the first three games ended, second, third, and fourth board, and it was all down to the Gukesh board, which we finally won and won the match with China. Now we have a very dominating position with while beating China, and US not really near the top. India has now a very good chance to win this Olympiad. Tomorrow India is playing Iran, which is not really the best team, but is very strong with two 2700s on board 1 and 2, Tabatabai and Maksudlu, but here against India, I don't think they don't have a very big chances. Hopefully India wins again tomorrow, and I'll be back with that video. So if you guys like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. And if you guys have any kind of suggestions, you can just put it in the comment box. I'll try to improve. So thank you for sticking till now. I'll see you guys tomorrow with the recap of round 8. Bye bye.